As you can probably tell from the title of this video, I'm going to be talking about my weight loss journey and how I managed to keep the weight off for over 6 years. I'm going to try and keep this really short and sweet because I do have a tendency to ramble on, but this is my first proper sit down YouTube video where I'm talking to the camera, so apologies if I do ramble on a little bit. Obviously, if you're watching this video, you have some kind of intent of losing weight. Maybe you're on a weight loss journey already, or you're just looking for a bit of guidance to get started. So for context, I lost 20 kilos in 2020. I know it was like the year of transformations, but I actually got to a point at the end of 2019 where I was just not feeling confident in myself. I was feeling sluggish. And you know what? I think a lot of the time it's not even down to how much you weigh. It's not even down to the number on the scale. It's how you feel within yourself. I was at a point where I was feeling not very confident. I didn't have much energy. I wasn't feeling motivated. I just wasn't feeling great. So I knew something had to change, and I had to change the way that I ate. I had to change my lifestyle, but it's very daunting when you're in that position and you genuinely have no idea how to do that, because I grew up as a child that hated exercise. I never did exercise. I was the person that tried to get out of PE every week. I had absolutely no confidence in myself or my body. So yeah, I'm coming from a position where I'm basically starting from zero, which is a very empowering position to be in as well, because when you make that change in your life and you see the difference, it is crazy. So I don't ramble on. I've actually written a list of questions to answer so I don't go on too much of a tangent. So the first question is, what did you actually do to lose it? The first step that I took was just to change the way that I was eating. So I enjoyed Christmas and that period, and then straight after Christmas I made little changes in the run up to the new year. I knew that protein was very important, so I started tracking what I was eating, not doing anything too drastic at the beginning, but I wanted to have that data, so I knew that how much I was eating to begin with. So the first thing that I did was have that data there so I can work on it and improve it, because there's no point in it trying to drastically change everything overnight. It's just going to overwhelm you. It's just too much. Like when you're talking about changing your lifestyle completely and the way that you eat, it's a big change, and you don't want to just go at it all guns blazing, because you're going to feel overwhelmed and like you're just not capable of doing it. The second thing that I made a priority was meal prepping. So as soon as we got back in the office in the January, I made sure that on a Sunday I would prep my lunches for the week, every single week. And looking back at the kind of meals I made, they were so horrible. They were like typical meals that you would make when you first start a diet and you think, this is the kind of food I need to eat. But this is the exact reason why I love sharing my recipes now, because I love showing people that you don't have to eat chicken, rice and veg to have a successful fat loss journey. You can still eat the foods you love, you just make little changes to them along the way to make them healthier and more sustainable. So yeah, I would meal prep my lunches. To be fair, one of the lunches that I used to make, that I still make to this day, is chili and a jacket potato, or chili and rice. That is a staple in our rotation of lunches. This was a non-negotiable for me because I was the type of person that would go out at lunch and buy snacks and food, and if I didn't have something prepped ready to go, I would make bad choices. And if you put yourself in that position, you're already making it harder for yourself. If you have lunch already there, it's easier to choose that over going out and buying something else to eat. The third thing that I changed pretty much straight away was making sure that my plates were a lot more balanced. So I never used to think about this when I would make dinners or lunches. I would make whatever I fancied. I didn't care. But now when I look at building a meal, I try to prioritize at least half the plate being vegetables, and then a smaller amount of carbs and protein. The last biggest thing that I changed was fizzy drinks. I am the biggest fizzy drinks fiend there is. I absolutely love fizzy drinks, and that was one of my biggest downfalls because we always had full fat. So the easiest thing to do was switch to sugar-free. I am now the biggest Pepsi Max fan in the world. I think it actually tastes better than full fat. I never have full fat. It's just a waste of calories, and I'd rather use those calories on food than drink. So those were the first major kind of changes that I made to food and my diet. And obviously I started going to the gym. So the one thing that I would say is find a form of exercise that you really enjoy and you can see yourself doing long term. So obviously this was 2020 before COVID happened. It's actually crazy to think about the fact that I used to be in the office every day full time. So I didn't have the luxury of popping to the gym on my lunch break or whatever. So actually setting my alarm for 5 in the morning and prioritizing going to the gym before work, which is actually crazy to think of now because I would never be caught dead in the gym at 6 a.m. now. But this was how motivated I was at the time, which is, again, something I'm going to talk about is the motivation aspect of it and how it wears off. But I would probably go to the gym before work about 2 or 3 times in the week, and then I would go for my last session at the weekend. So I would try and aim for 4 days of strength training every single week, and I actually have done that like ever since. Like I've kept it up, and I feel like I'm quite lucky that I started going to the gym and strength training and I genuinely enjoyed it, and I've kept it up to this day. That's why I think it's so important to, if you go to the gym and don't enjoy it, to try different forms of exercise that you genuinely do enjoy, because it's something that you have to build into your routine. And if you don't like it, A, why are you doing it? And B, you're not going to want to do it long term. So it has to be something sustainable for you personally. Someone in my family actually went to the gym at the time and wrote me a gym plan. So I was following that for about a year, and then I kind of went off on my own tangent and downloaded the Evolve You app, and I was following workouts from there. And now I actually write my own workout split. So at the beginning I was doing quite a manly split. I was doing back and biceps, chest and triceps, and legs and shoulders. Recently I do glutes and quads, glutes and hamstrings, an upper day and a posterior day, or a full body day, depending on the split that I've written. I do that for a period of time and then I write a new split. That is what I started doing at the beginning of 2020, and then obviously the gyms closed when everything happened with COVID. So I actually got some weights at home and I was still doing workouts. I wasn't really progressing in it like I should have been, but I was still losing weight because of the way that I was eating. And I'm sure you've heard this a million times before, but you can't out-train a bad diet, which is why I mentioned focusing on your diet first before you try and do endless amounts of cardio or exercise. When it comes to exercise, I actually was doing the 4 workouts a week for a long time until I got to a point where I wasn't losing any more weight. So I felt like I had to do a bit more movement. So then I started running 3 times a week. Looking back now, that wasn't necessary, but I think because of the way that lockdown was, I think everyone was getting into running. It was quite a big thing, so I started couch to 5k. I was doing quite a lot back then. I think when you first get into fitness, you're seeing results, you're feeling really motivated, you're feeling disciplined, you just want to try everything. And I was doing probably about 3 HIIT workouts a week, 3 runs a week, 4 strength training sessions a week. Once the gyms reopened, it was a lot. So the one thing I would say now, in hindsight, looking back at that, is you do not have to do that much. It's too much. I've gone from someone who's never exercised pretty much to just doing exercise every single day in multiple different forms, and I ended up injuring myself. So what I would actually recommend, and what I would do now if I was in that position again, is make a plan of what you want to do per week. You can start with 2 or 3 days at the gym. That is absolutely fine. And then I would implement a daily step goal, which I have now. So I aim for about 8,000 to 10,000 steps a day, and I don't measure that daily really. I kind of measure it weekly. So if one day I do like 5,000 steps, I just try and make it up throughout the week, because I don't want to put so much pressure on one day alone. So I would look at it as more of a week overview than a daily overview, if that makes sense. Because if you think about it, if you are in a similar position to me where I had never exercised before in my life and I didn't know what I enjoyed doing, I'm already making such a big difference going to the gym 4 times a week. I don't need to be running and doing HIIT workouts as well, because I'm already changing so much about my lifestyle, losing weight successfully doing that. You don't need to do high intensity training, you don't need to do running, just gentle walks is absolutely fine. And that's another thing with cardio. I see a lot of people online talking about the Stairmaster or running And you don't need to. I actually focus now on uphill walking. That's all I do. I strength train, I get my daily step count, and I do uphill walking on a treadmill, probably like incline 9 or incline 10 on speed 3.5. And I do that for maybe 30 minutes a week, an hour a week, depending on how I'm feeling that week. Because that was another thing that I used to think, that you had to do really high intensity cardio as a form of cardio, but you can just do uphill walking. That's perfectly fine as well. The next question that I wanted to answer was, what did you eat while losing the weight? Did you count calories or follow a specific diet? I personally count calories. I find it really helpful. I know that it doesn't work for everyone, but even if you were to just do it at the beginning to kind of get an idea of how much you are eating, or I've seen a lot of people actually will rotate the same meals every week. So they'll have the same lunch, the same dinner, the same breakfast, so they know exactly how many calories they're eating and they don't have to guess. That is another good technique that you could do. But I personally love calorie counting. I still do it to this day. I've been doing it for over 6 years. I just find it really helpful. I didn't follow a specific diet. As I said, I did focus a lot on high protein meals, but I didn't actually focus on things like fiber back then, which I try to focus on now. But yeah, there was no specific diet at all. I would basically take meals that I enjoyed eating and make healthy swaps to them to make them more sustainable. For example, if I wanted a burger bowl, I would use 5% mince instead of 20%. I would use yogurt instead of mayo to make the burger sauce. I would bulk up the meal with half salad, and I would bulk up the mince with onion, pepper, maybe a bit of courgette, just high volume ingredients that will fill you up quicker and make the meal even bigger, so you feel like you're having a huge portion, but they barely add any calories to it at all. I also switched the cheese that I was buying to 50% reduced fat. I started buying the lightest Philadelphia, the cream cheese, and I would add that into things that would usually have like cream or double cream or like high fat sauces. I would use the lightest Philadelphia, or I would use Greek yogurt, the 0% one, or I would use cottage cheese. So the way that I eat and that I try to teach people to eat in my content is, think of a meal that you absolutely love. How can you adapt that meal to suit your macros and your calories? Look at that recipe and think, how can I make small tweaks to that to bring the calories down, to bring the volume up? What veggies can I add in there? What little swaps can I make from, I don't know, cream to cream cheese, or full fat cheddar to 50% lighter? How did you stop yourself from regaining the weight once you reached your goal? So this is probably the most important question of the whole video. I've obviously talked about how I lost the weight, the changes that I made, but the hardest thing with weight loss is actually maintaining your weight loss. So back then, before I lost the fat, before I started going to the gym, before I started eating differently, I thought, once I lose the weight, I'm sorted. But keeping it off and maintaining that fat loss is the hardest part of it. And I feel like that's not what a lot of people actually talk about online. I see so much content about how to lose weight. There's a lot of great advice out there. And I watched a lot of videos like this before I actually went through my own weight loss journey. And once you get into that rhythm and you understand what works, how to eat, it's great. You will lose weight, you'll be successful, and you'll manage to lose weight and you'll get to your goal. But once you get there, how do you keep it off? Now, I'm not saying that I'm perfect, and I have kept all of the weight off all of these 6 years, because I have regained a few pounds here and there. That's for a load of different reasons, like stress, work, family situations. There's a load of reasons as to why that's happened, but that's just normal. It's so normal for your weight to fluctuate. I am not the same person that I was in 2020. I am now in my 30s. I am a completely different woman to who I was back then. I also have different eating habits. I have a completely different routine. Like, life changes. You're never going to be the same person that you were when you initially lost the weight, especially if it's taken you quite a few years to get there. But I think the most important thing to understand is that once you lose that weight, you can't just think, that's it, I can just eat what I want, because I made that mistake quite a few times. You can't look at it as a diet. You have to look at it as a lifestyle change. So essentially what's allowed me to keep off this weight is I've continued to eat the same way ever since. That is now my way of eating, and that is how I'm going to continue to eat for the rest of my life. I don't go to the shops now and buy frozen chicken, like breaded chicken, or frozen pizza. Don't get me wrong, sometimes I do, but I always try to go for the healthier option. And when you can make it yourself at home, why would you buy it? Like, obviously I'm quite lucky to work from home and have time to cook. That is my whole job. So I have that time in my schedule to be able to prep meals and cook things from scratch. But things like pasta sauces, where you could have some really high fat, high calorie sauces that you can buy at the shop. You can make pasta sauce so easily at home and it tastes so much better. Like, whenever me and my partner try things now that we used to eat from years ago, we're always disappointed because we're like, we used to love this. But now that we cook everything from scratch at home, you don't realise how much better it tastes until you go to try something that you used to love years ago from the shop and you're like, this is not great. That is my biggest piece of advice here, is I have never gone back to my old way of eating. Like, this is how I eat now, and I don't feel like I'm restricting myself. I remember when I was first losing the weight and I had a few people ask me, like, do you have any like cheat days? Do you allow yourself cheat days? And I used to say, like, well, I don't feel like I need it because I still have the foods that I love. I still eat the meals that I love. I still have pizza. I still have chocolate. I still have everything I enjoy. I just enjoy it in moderation now, whereas before that wasn't the case. And then when it comes to exercise, that is something that you have to maintain as well. If you think about it, if you've gone from nothing to then training 4 days a week, getting your daily step goal, and then you go back to doing nothing again, you're obviously going to regain the weight because you're consuming more calories than you're burning. It's something I genuinely enjoy, and even though in the last couple of months I've made the decision to drop down to 3 days a week strength training just because of work stresses and things like that, even though I've made that change, I still prioritize those 3 days at the gym. I still get my daily step count, I still do cardio, I still tick it all off. Don't get me wrong, there are some weeks where I allow myself a break and I take a step back and I think I actually need to not do anything this week because I feel unwell, or I feel stressed, or I feel tired, and just doing more exercise when you feel like that is going to make you feel worse. So I'm not saying that you have to consistently exercise every single week for the rest of your life. You obviously still need breaks here and there, but keeping up with your exercise routine, still continuing to eat the same way that you did in your fat loss phase, those are the two key fundamentals to keeping the weight off long term. I actually had a comment on one of my TikTok videos the other week where someone said, how do you change how you eat from a calorie deficit? How would you then change those meals? So I do pretty much eat the same things. I just make the meals bigger. I allow myself to have more snacks. You don't need to change the fundamentals of your meal. You don't need to change the types of meals you're eating. Just add slightly more to the plate. So the next question is, how do you deal with weekends, holidays, eating out and going off plan? I filmed one of my what I eat in a day the other week. I actually touched on this about how I am one of these people where I don't go on holiday and still try to hit my protein goal or stay within a certain amount of calories. I don't track when I'm on holiday. I just allow myself complete time off. I just personally like to really enjoy my holiday as much as possible when I'm away, not have to think about tracking or worrying about how many calories are in something. I just want to enjoy myself. So when it comes to holidays, I don't think about it. But then again, another thing I would say is the way that I cook, I don't really use a lot of oils, I don't really have a lot of sickly food. Everything is homemade. So when you go from that to eating out constantly on holiday, you do notice a real difference. So when we are on holiday, I do tend to eat slightly less because I can feel like the food is very heavy on my stomach and I do feel maybe a bit sick or bloated. So we would probably have a big breakfast and then dinner, for example, and like a snack in between, rather than having breakfast, lunch and dinner. With eating out, I'm kind of the same. Like, if I am in a calorie deficit, I will try and go for a healthier option. If I'm just in a maintenance phase, I just will go for whatever I want. I'm not the kind of creator that's going to make you feel guilty for getting what you want when you eat out. Like, I really respect people that do, that really stick to healthier options when they're eating out, but that's not something that I prioritize, and I'm absolutely fine with that. I personally think life is too short. If you eat well most of the time during the week, allow yourself just a meal out, to pick something on the menu that you're not thinking how many calories are in that, how much protein is in that. Just pick it because you genuinely want it and you're going to enjoy it. And if I do go off plan, for example, and feel like I have definitely gone over my calories, I'm not going to deprive myself the next day. I'm just going to pick up as normal and get back on track. There's no point in not allowing yourself as many calories the next day, or not allowing yourself to have a piece of chocolate when you want it, because you're just going to end up wanting it even more. And knowing myself really well, I'll just binge. And then the last question that I wanted to answer was, if you had to lose 20 kg again, what would you do differently? I've touched on this already, but less exercise. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but you don't need to exercise that much. When it comes to food, I wouldn't just focus on high protein, I would also focus on fibre. I was guilty of, if I did go over my calories when I first lost the weight, if I went over my calories by like 200, for example, I would then minus that from the next day. So I was trying to eat about 1,500 calories a day, which again was a very generic number. I didn't really work it out properly, and it probably was a bit too low. I didn't have to jump that low straight away. So that would mean that I'd only eat about 1,300 calories in a day, which is just too low. That I would not recommend, and I would not do that again. The calories, like I just said, that probably was a bit too low. I shouldn't have started off at 1,500. I should have gone higher and worked my way down, because then also your body gets used to that amount of calories. And it is harder to lose weight in the long term because your body adjusts to that amount of calories. I didn't know about volume eating back then either. So when I look back at the photos I took of my meals, there was barely anything on the plate. Like, I had such tiny portions, and I ate like that for such a long period of time. I was in a deficit for like a year, which again, wouldn't recommend. That is not normal. You shouldn't be in a deficit for that long. You should only be in a deficit for like, I don't know, a couple of months at a time, 3 months, 4 months, and then have a break, or just maintain for a couple of months. That's a very long period of time to be in a deficit. So I wouldn't recommend that. And that's something, again, that I would change. But it was my first time doing it, and I was very new to everything, and I didn't know this back then. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't recommend doing that. If that's something that you're doing now, please don't. The other thing that I was talking about is volume eating. So now I try to make my meals as big as I possibly can for little to no extra calories. So like I mentioned earlier, trying to get extra veg in a burger bowl, for example, in the beef, onions, pepper, courgette. Grated courgette is great. You can't even taste it. I don't like courgette, but I add it to a lot of meals because you can't taste it, and it just adds so much volume to your meal. It helps so much with hunger and cravings and filling you up, and it's obviously a great source of fibre. It's probably the last thing that I would have changed. I would educate myself a bit more on volume eating and how to actually eat for fat loss for long-term results. I really hope you found this video helpful. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do more videos like this, if you have any questions that you want me to answer, and I'll see you on the next one.